G'day guys, Josh here. Hope you guys are having a great day today. We're going to go through the ESL Pro League conference stage today. And we've got a lot of things to debrief, with what went on during the event. And, well, it was a great event overall. We had some big surprises. We had some teams, getting the first time in the ESL Pro League. And then we had the usuals getting the job done. Now, this is actually one of the rare ESL conferences where there was actually 3 Australian teams, which is the most out of Australia's had in quite a while. And there was actually one representative from Asia, which was Tyloo, which replaced Rare Atom, which is a bit of a disappointment. And, that's essentially what we got basically as well. Now, we had a lot of European teams in the mix as well from the various ESL championships and also from the world rankings as well. We didn't go through the entire list in alphabetical order with, basically how everything went and also how the team really performed. But first of all, we're going to do my picks to qualify. So my picks to qualify initially were Eternal Fire, Eternal Fire, Heat, MIBR, Order, Outsiders, and Sprout. Okay, with Heat and Sprout going through the limit lower stages, and Order, Eternal Fire, MIBR, and Outsiders go through the upper bracket. Now, to see who actually qualified, well, I've got 4 out of 6 there as well, and we'll go through that very, very shortly with the pluses and minuses that I feel the teams had in that session as well. Now, we're going to go in alphabetical order, so first off, we're going to do Kowana. Funnily enough, there was no other team starting with A or B in the conference stage, funnily enough. Okay, I was like sitting there going like, wait, what? There's no A and B? Kowana is the first one up there? But anyways, with Kowana, so Kowana, I did say they would get eliminated probably in the lower round 1. They did a lot better than I expected. They beat Strife, and I thought Strife were going to be more competitive, to be honest. And Kowana blitzed them, and that was really, really good, given the fact that basically Kowana's roster is just a mixed match of players with HS, Crystal, Stefan, Kolor, Matty. It is really a mixed match of players, and I actually did not expect them to perform that well, but they did. They performed quite well. They got through the lower bracket round 1. However, they did get eliminated by Valkyns, and that's probably going to be saying not too much because Falcons are a more war machine compared to Kowana. But I gotta say, it's good to see Crystal still playing in the roster as well. Really respect him as a player. He's definitely a mathematical genius at times. And I wish Kowana all the best. I think basically overall, they just got beaten by a much better team. But it's good to see that Kowana did not really surrender so meekly, in those death games where they're not expected to really win. Now, that was the main plus, okay? Now, for the minuses, probably not qualifying. I reckon they overachieved. Okay, like they achieved a lot better than they expected. And I think Kowana can be happy in that aspect, but not happy for the fact they didn't qualify. And it's just another season. Kowana have already been eliminated from Advanced, I believe, or on the cusp of elimination. And this is not good for them either, because they have to win through the German ESL National League again to go in. Next up, we've got, oh god, do you want more? The first Australian team. And I'm going to say, the pluses, I'm going to say they put up a major, major fight against Heat compared to the absolute diabolical mess they put up against Order. Order absolutely smashed them to pieces, which wasn't really good to see, to be honest. I want a more competitive nature from Australian teams and stuff like that as well. Now, they did put up a good fight against Heat, even though they lost 2-0. I think both maps went to double digits. That was really, really good, given the fact that Heat qualified. And also at the same time, Heat are a very, very good team, and they're probably expected to just absolutely decimate Encore, probably 16-5, 16-6. Minuses, though, is obviously no maps won against a team at all in the tournament. And that at the end of the day, it's runs on the board that you got to score. You got to get those 1 maps on the board, either 1 or 2 maps, or 2 maps obviously winning, of course, but get at least 1 map or 2 maps on the board. At least, you can't have too many brave losses. You've got to get runs on the board, and I think they know that as well. You got to be able to get a 1 map, maybe 2 maps of some of these European teams, and basically go hell for leather at it. And a disappointment from Encore, who've been boot camping in Europe, being unable to convert this experience into some victories for themselves in the ESL Pro League, the Major, and now ESL Conference. And hopefully Encore comes back, into action and really rebounds hard, and hopefully gets to some more international experience and potentially a few W's on the board as well, because they definitely need it. Now, next one, Endpoint. Okay, I predicted Endpoint would actually go out very, very early, funnily enough. I thought they'd go out very, very early, probably LR2. But they qualified. Went 2-0. They beat Order and they beat Heat. And I gotta say, I was surprised when they beat Heat, because I thought Heat were just gonna basically decimate them. It would have been Order v Heat. But it popped up to be Order v Endpoint, and Endpoint absolutely did not disappoint, absolutely disposed of Order in a quick succession as well. Nertz was absolutely on fire. And I thought those quick switches, not quick switches, but the switches in the core would hurt them quite a bit. But, Surreal, Crucial, and Mighty Max, that trio continues to impress over and over and over again. And all those doubters who would just say that, Mighty Max is done, he's not a great IG, or anything like that, would completely shut up. Endpoint just went 2-0 and smashed it out of the park. And, minuses. There's no real minuses in this roster. I mean, this team went 4-0 when they're probably not expected to go 4-0. Some can argue that the group was weak because they had Encore, Order, Heat, and Endpoint, with Heat being the highest level team compared to the other groups with MIBR, Outsiders, and, funnily enough, Sprout and all that jazz in the other areas, and Eternal Fire. It could have been viewed as a pretty weak group. So Endpoint could be a charity of, just a charity of gifted a spot. But it didn't look like it. Endpoint disposed of the teams 2-0. Didn't really let them in. And no maps being won against them, I believe, at all. And they did a very good job. I think they did a very clinical. It seemed like they were like, MIBR and stuff like that as well, where they just basically bashed out the first two BO3s and to ESL Pro League they go. And they did an impressive job overall. Now let's get on to the next team. Eternal Fire. Okay, Eternal Fire, the Turkish super team. Well, the pluses is they did what they were expected to do. Eternal Fire is probably one of the strongest teams in the tournament. And I think probably say second or third strongest, and did a very, very good showing in the major. They absolutely blitzed the major and got to, I believe, the Legends stage in the end. But it doesn't really matter. If Legends challenges, they got there and they qualified through to RMR, which is incredible. Now, they were expected to go 2-0. They went 2-0 and they smashed out of the park and absolutely blitzed every single team in that division as well. Now, the funny thing is that they versed Hummers, I believe, instead of Sprout, and they did, and I was actually really, really surprised by that. And I was going to say, well, Eternal Fire have qualified now. The hardest opponent in that Group C area is now at the bottom, which is Sprout, as Hummers upset them massively. And, Eternal Fire just cruised with it. Calyx, Xantares, Woxic, Xcloud, Immor, they're just unstoppable at the moment. They're just basically cruising along form. They beat FTW, they beat Hammer. I mean, some people may say, oh, they're pretty weak opponents, but, what is Eternal Fire going to do? Like, the stronger opponents are nowhere near them, and Eternal Fire is just a strong team overall. They'll probably, receive more competitive later on in the ESL Pro League, but you can only really verse what's ahead of you at the end of the time. That's probably the only real negative, is that they did verse some weak teams, but overall, sometimes the way you beat weak teams is probably the strongest message you can send, and they beat them quite convincingly and just went about their business. No, letting the other team have a chance, basically. Falcons. Well, Falcons, they did not qualify, and in fact, they weren't really expected to qualify either. In fact, they actually got as far as the lower round 3, and I'm going to say they were really, really close to beating Heat, except, that third map wasn't the greatest. But let's go with the pluses. The pluses is the fact that they made it a lot farther than actually that I predicted they would, because I felt like they're going to get knocked out by either Strife or Tyloo after beating the Falcons in that lower bracket area. But Falcons, did a very, very good job. Disposed of Kawana, got really, really close to Heat. They could have qualified themselves, Falcons, as well. They actually got a really, really strong roster. And it was a French derby for the ESL Pro League qualification in the end. And the main plus I'm going to say is they got a chance to potentially qualify for ESL Pro League, but fell agonizingly short. And it would have been huge for Maka and a lot of the ex-teammates that are on those respective teams if they did qualify for the ESL Pro League, as both, Maka's ex-teammates in Heat and vice versa. It would have been some massive bragging rights. But, that third map was just ugly to watch. 16-4, they got absolutely blitzed and trounced, and it was so close for the first two maps. For everything to fall apart like that on the third map is very disappointing to see. And I think they'll be very, very disappointed in themselves as well. Overall, Falcons had a pretty decent tournament, considering that I expected them to go out in lower round 2 or lower round 1 for that example as well. And also, not to mention as well, the Vertex and lower seed tournament, they gave them no chance. They just basically knocked them out of the park, and it's like, yeah, you're not going to try and upset us, are you? And that was really, really good to see. Now, for the most impressive team in the tournament, actually stole that from Endpoint, FTW. FTW qualified. Portuguese CSGO has their first team in ESL Pro League in quite a long time. maybe 6 or 9 months. I'm not terribly too sure because I remember Saw qualified at one point, but Saw really just got bundled out. But FTW is a new kid on the block, and they've been in Saw's shadow quite a bit, but they've been beating Saw in some lands, and this led to the Portuguese believing that they would qualify to nothing at one point. And I just pointed at the fact that they were going to be versing Eternal Fire and be like, you're probably not going to be beating anyone to nothing. But they qualified nonetheless, and they qualified in a very, very, very good fashion as well, and a very dominant fashion as well. And also, I gotta say, some resiliency in it as well, considering the game against Order, where Dust 2 was Order's map pick and they won 16-1 and basically just blasted Order to smithereens. And I've got to say that's very, very impressive, given that Dust 2 is their worst map and they've just been beaten, battered, and bruised by Iron Branch previously as well. Now, they actually qualified when they probably were the least likely to qualify. No one even thought that they were going to qualify. They were just massive underdogs. In fact, people had rated them below Order and still in the likes of Vertex and Encore of qualifying for ESL Pro League, which is very, very unlikely. And, they start off, as per usual. They lost 2-0 to Eternal Fire. I guess say nothing to really to squib about or say that they're worst team or anything like that about, because they were expected to lose, honestly. But the fact that they beat Sprout, that is a massive, massive message. Beating Sprout 2-1, then beating Order 2-0, winning on the worst map Dust 2, and then disposing of a Luminaire, who were only really in the lower bracket purely because they versed Outsiders first, is a massive cap in the hat, and what a lower bracket run, and they deserve it. All credit to them. They played amazingly well, and they deserve it. Now, hopefully, they can get a lot better in their advance and just smash that out, and maybe win it to really top off their ESL Pro League run, because they still got to qualify for next season, unless they win the Portuguese ESL Cup again, basically. But they did a very, very good job. It's really good seeing a younger team get in there as well. And also, the worst part with these younger teams as well is they can be consistent or inconsistent, and they were very consistent all day through. Now, the minuses, well, there's no really minuses I'm going to say right now for FTW. They did a lot better than anyone was expecting, okay? There can't be really many negatives at all. I mean, they beat Sprout, which they shouldn't have been Sprout, to be honest, okay? Let's get to the next game, okay? Heat. Well, they qualified, didn't they? And they were expected to qualify as well, but geez, that second bracket was a bit easy for them, but they got knocked to the lower bracket by Endpoint. That was out of nowhere, and that was like, oh no, is Heat gonna get eliminated too? But they blitzed through Heat in the end. They beat Encore, they beat Hammer. They, after Hammer upset Sprout, they could have been the next ones to block, and they beat Falcons as well. They're basically the national rivalry as well. And Heat, another lower bracket run, kind of like FTW, but more likely that was going to happen or not. I think Heat are just very, very relieved of the fact that they got that through in the end. And I think Jocko, Body, and all that are just loving it at the moment. Next up is Hummer. Now, Hummer made it a lot further than actually... no, Hummer was as expected, to be honest, with how they made it at the moment. And I guess I quick switched too quickly, so you probably see the Hummer sign come up for half a second or so. The pluses for Hummer, I'm going to say, is the fact they beat Sprout. Probably the biggest plus of the tournament is the way they beat Sprout. However, they were almost going to get absolutely blitzed by Eternal Fire, and that's what happened. And then they went down to Heat, and yeah, basically Heat bundled them out. I think it's a bit disappointing after beating a team like Sprout that you're unable to capitalize to get either a good lower bracket run or a good upper bracket run. And I think that's probably the biggest disappointment here for Hummer, is that they beat a good team, and then they can't really follow it up. And that's pretty disappointing to see as well. Would they get into a tournament like this in the future? Probably not. I think a lot of South American teams are probably going to go back, and I guess that's probably one of Hummer's only opportunities, unfortunately, for such a young roster as well. And this is the problem with young rosters this time, as I said. Sometimes they can be consistent, sometimes they can be very inconsistent as well. And we got the inconsistent Hummer towards the end there, after the inconsistent Hummer to beat Sprout. That's probably the major minus. Anyways, guys, next up, Illuminaire. So Illuminaire, the Polish team that versed Outsiders first, and probably the most unluckiest team ever in the bracket when they're versing Outsiders. And I'm sitting there going yeah, you won the Polish Championship just to verse Outsiders first round, and that happened. 2-0, Illuminaire in the lower bracket. Now, I got to give Illuminaire credit. They did take care of the teams that they should have taken care of, except FTW. They took care of Vertex, they took care of Tyloo. The Tyloo match was absolute domination by Illuminaire. But they fell over at the end, even when performing so well against FTW. They won the second match 16-5 and absolutely blitzed FTW, just to lay an absolute egg on the final round, and FTW coming back to win 16-12. Now, Illuminaire, this is very disappointing for them. They were probably expected to qualify. as well. Even though I didn't pick them to qualify, I probably expect to qualify given the fact that they are a very, very good team and have been performing up some huge, huge numbers. And it's really disappointing that they were eliminated this early. Well, not this early, they were eliminated at the end. And they were so close yet so far. And like I say, the biggest minus is that they really should have qualified with their opponents that they're versing. I mean, they're versing Vertex, Tyloo, and FTW, probably 6 of the lowest teams, and they lay egg against FTW, which is not ideal. Maybe the fatigue crawled in, not terribly too short, since they're, basically the lower round bandits, basically fighting through the lower bracket. Next up, we got MIBR. And, basically MIBR are like, it used to be, the old guys club with Fallen, the Last Dance, blah, blah, blah. Let's not talk about the Last Dance, obviously, but MIBR, this young roster, can, as I said, with young rosters, it can be inconsistent at times, and it's very, very frustrating, but MIBR did what MIBR had to do. Even though it wasn't that convincing, they got that 2-0 and got to the tournament. And sometimes it's not about the scores that you get. Sometimes it's about just getting in there to 2-0 without going to the lower bracket. And that's what they did in the top bracket. They were expected to win. They did so. They did it very, very well as well. And they beat Kowana. They beat Tyloo. Get up there. All done and dusted. I know the teams that they verse probably aren't the strongest, but they got to get the tours in the board. Don't make themselves complicated. They're a team that made the major. Played pretty well in the major as well. They deserve it. They did a good job. And, congratulations to MIBR for being ESL Pro League. And congratulations to Immortals as well for backing, such a team as MIBR and backing new talent rather than recycling old talent over and over again, which can be a common theme in the South American scene. We're, not shouting out any names, Cough, Zero Nation and Imperial. But it's good to see, trying new Brazilian talent out, okay? Really, really happy to see. Now, also, the bad thing about MIBR, maybe, some of the results are a bit close, but by hook or by crook, you need to qualify. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, as long as you got 16 rounds, you're all good and you're all through. And, with a young roster, you got to expect the instability and the craziness of results where it can just go ping-ponging from time to time. It takes a while to become a consistent team. Next up, Order. And I got to say, Order did not win a single map against a team that was not from Australia, only winning 2-0 against Encore. And I expected more from Order, to be honest, okay? I expected Order to beat Endpoint or beat Heat, but they were unable to do it, unfortunately. But the pluses are is that they did the 2-0 over Encore, and they did very, very dominant in that performance as well. They played very, very well against Endpoint, despite losing. Endpoint was just that much sharper. But I gotta say, second map against FTW, big minus here, was the fact they just surrendered so meekly on Dust 2. And this is the worst part. FTW's worst map is Dust 2. They just got barreled by Iron Branch previously on Dust 2. In Order, they just didn't look very good on Dust 2. And they just got absolutely blitzed by FTW in the end. And for Order at the moment, the top AU team to get just basically destroyed like that, it's just not good watching at the end of the day. And I think basically they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. It's probably the biggest minus, I got to say, is just when they needed to stand up the most, they just got absolutely blitzed by a younger squad in FTW. And I think basically you can go to the changes of IGL into Sicko and stuff like that, still not used to the system yet, which is understandably so. I mean, the major was only about 1 or 2 months ago. It takes a while to build an IGL. You can give them that, stuff like that as well. Because, it's going to be inconsistent across the board when you have a new IGL, when you have a new system being put into place as well. And overall, they're going to build it up. They're going to build up eventually. Hopefully get a good core in there as well, and really have a good system in place to really help it along. And hopefully the IGL issues aren't a bit more deeper as per se, but we'll see what happens with Order. I was a bit disappointed in the fact that they, the Dust 2 pick, and they lost it really, really badly to FTW. Probably not the greatest look. And that's probably the biggest minus. But the biggest plus I'm going to say is that Ali, Hats, Josh, Ids looked very, very good against the win against Encore. They looked very, very good despite the loss against Endpoint. Endpoint was just a bit sharper. And those are the main pluses and minuses of the entire ordeal as well. Next one up, Outsiders. Outsiders, wow. Well, they did expect a 2-0, but I didn't expect to do it in the fashion that they did. They absolutely crushed every single team in front of them. I mean, Outsiders, they beat Illuminar as expected, and then when they came up against Falcons, they beat them as well, and that's pretty much it. They, had a very, very strong showing, and I was actually really, really surprised. I think the results is 16-7, 16-8 against Illuminaire, and it was 16-6 and 16-10 against Falcons. Very, very strong setup, And Outsiders, as expected, qualify, and the highest ranked team in there, so expecting to qualify. But I was actually really, really surprised at the fact that they're not blip, because I just know Outsiders love losing BO3s randomly. And they didn't blip at all, they just basically just pushed all the way and just smashed it. And that's the biggest plus that they did. They did not blip at all, and there's no real minuses here. I think there'll be only a minus if they lost at all. Like if they lost any BO3s, it'll be a big minus the fact that they're one of the strongest teams in the tournaments and they're losing to effectively tier 2 and tier 3 teams. No minuses at all. They did a very good job. They qualified. They did their job. 2-0, 2-0, get to the next stage. They deserve it. Next up, and probably the biggest disappointment in the tournament, is Sprout. Okay? Sprout, they got Lonks. They got so many stars. Stayo as well. And they were performing so well against so many other teams. Like Lonks and Stayo putting up huge numbers. And this was the team I was looking forward to. Like, I was like, Sprout either going to qualify straight up for upper bracket or qualify for a lower bracket. And they don't. They win, I think, one map. And two maps. They lose to Hummer. And then they lose to FDW. That is, I guess, right now, Sprout. Just, I don't know. Okay, there's really no pluses in going out 0-2 in a tournament that you effectively expected to be in that lower bracket final or going through in the upper bracket. And Sprout's been on the cusp of qualifying for ESL Pro League for a long time, and this is incredibly disappointing for them. And it's a big minus that they just did not perform, and they were beaten by teams that they should be arguably beating on paper. They've got the better players, they've got the better everything, and this is ultimately super disappointing for Sprout. Now, Sprout, I believe they qualified via ESA Premier. They'll probably be back. I'm going to say right now, they'll probably be back. They are too good for ESA Premier, but I just don't know how they keep just falling apart at ESL Pro League stage. Okay, they have such great players. Like they've had Diha and all this stuff going through the roster as well. They have very strong players. Sadly, they still can't get it right. They still can't get over the Blues and just getting over the hurdle or just qualifying for ESL Pro League. It's just, at this stage, it's just the biggest disappointment, in my opinion. Like, I don't see any positives out of it. It's just all minuses all across the column. Strife, I gotta say, they weren't expected to do much. I had them eliminated in the lower bracket 2. They got eliminated in the lower bracket 1 by, I believe, it was Kawana. Now, they also lost to Tyloo 2-0, and given how Tyloo got absolutely wrecked by Luminaire, probably not enticing of Strife too much that they got beaten by Tyloo. Now, Strife, disappointing in the lower bracket as well, getting lost to Kawana. I gotta say, Strife, given how well they're performing in the NA, is a Premier at the moment. I expect a bit more that they could beat some of the Tier 2 EU teams, but they couldn't. And I gotta say, overall, they didn't even win a single map, which is not that great to go out with. Not really much positives to really come out of if you don't win a single map, and you're probably expected to win a few maps, especially against Tyloo, especially against Kawano as well, where the teams aren't exactly that strong. Those two teams aren't really that strong, and maybe grabbing a map on them is huge. It also just iterates the issue in the NA scene at the moment, where basically there's not many teams that are really contesting, as most of the experience has moved over to Valorant, with the franchising of that Valorant system there as well. Now, overall, Strife's going to just only improve with the European experiment being put in. I think Tahito and Fates are probably just working hard as hell to really try and make this project work, but this was a bit of a step back for them as well, or maybe just a test of where they're at the moment against this European opposition, and it just basically shows that Strife aren't up there yet, okay? When you lose to Tyloo, you're just not up there. Next up, Tyloo. Tyloo, a good start, you beat Strife 2-0, and then it went down. Down. I mean, they lost to MIBR as expected, 2-0. And then they lose to Luminaire 2-0 in the most horrific BO3 I've ever seen. They won a total of 5 rounds, okay, against Luminaire. The big plus is their first game against Strife. Good 2-0, they smashed it, everyone was popping off. And then the roller coaster just went down. And Tyloo did not play well at all. In fact, against Luminaire, they looked like they were barely in it. They like, it didn't look like they were going to win rounds. The rounds that they won were so scrappy and stuff like that as well. And it's just really disappointing to see Tyloo just get absolutely smashed like that. In fact, it's really bad when anything is smashed like that as well. But arguably so, Tyloo probably wasn't the strongest team. Probably wasn't a team they gave much chance to. So beating Strife was a really, really good effort. But the minus is just too much with the Luminaire match. That Luminaire BO3 was just not pleasant watching, and I think a lot of the fans of Tyloo just weren't happy with that. And last but not least, Vertex. Now, Vertex, they were the team that no one was expecting to qualify. Let's be honest, okay? Vertex were the lowest rated team by miles, and they certainly did show that, okay? Right, they were the lowest rated team. But I've got to say, with Vertex, the pluses is they showed a lot of fights in those BO3s that they lost against Falcons and Illuminaire. Given that Illuminaire creamed every single opponent that was lower than them other than FTW, Vertex put up a really, really good fight. I got to mention as well, yeah, PC played very, very well on his first LAN, despite the fact that if you compare him to his AWP partner, AWP Duo or AWP, opposite end, Mac and a few others, they did beat him, but PC set up pretty well, actually was very, very strong statistically and impactfully as well. And that was really, really good to see from Geordie and the Vertex players, that they're able to really try and take on these higher tier European rosters where they have probably little to no chance of winning. Now, in fact, as I said in the picks, like if they don't beat Falcons, they're getting eliminated. And as I said, and it happened because the Luminaire are just going to wipe them off the park, which is what exactly happened. Now, overall, I think it's Vertex's first trip to Europe, and I think they learned a lot. They boot camped as well, and I got to say, they almost got a map of Illuminaire. But as I said before, the minuses, you got to get an actual map. It's the same area of Encore. It's you didn't win a map at all. You need to get runs on the board. Probably less harsh to Vertex, given that they had probably little chance of winning this tournament, or not even even qualifying for ESL Pro League. But you still need to get runs on the board. You still need to get maps on the board. It's okay getting 11 or 12 rounds, but you really want to get that 16 on the board. That 16 and having a W, having that one map, or even a winning the map series overall. And that's how I feel about that one, okay? Personally, is that Vertex need to get runs on the board. Will they get much opportunities like this? I guess Vertex, given they're the third best team in the AU region, and they've been an Encore in order before, they'll get more opportunities, but they'll have to really, really fight for them as well, because given this will probably be the only tournament where Australian teams will have 3 teams that go over, it's going to be very difficult for them, okay? Because there's already cries to limit the Australian teams to even 1 or even 2 spots, and that's going to make it even harder for Vertex to get any sort of international experience. Now, for the debrief for the tournament overall, I can probably see in the future as well that the Australian teams being reduced to 3 teams. Not 3 teams, so probably to 1 or 2 teams, especially after that, given the fact that all Australian teams were eliminated without winning a single match against the non-European team. Now, NA will probably keep its spot, so with Asia as well, given the fact that Thailand wasn't really the first choice team, they wanted Rare Atom. I can imagine that Europe would be expanded to be including more spots, maybe a South African spot or something like that, given what just happened with the AU teams. But overall, it was a pretty good tournament. The teams that expected to qualify did qualify, and it was a really, really good, story for FTW, who did qualify in the end. And it was really, really awesome to see FTW qualifying and how happy they were and how happy the fan base was as well. They went absolutely crazy on HLTV. It was absolutely amazing to see. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for today. Hope you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you guys soon. See you guys later. Peace out. Josh out. Like, comment, subscribe. You can also watch me on my Twitch as well. Peace out, guys. Bye.